Hi, we're back for episode 2 of Jeremy Bentham and utilitarianism. I'd made the comments that Jeremy Bentham's fundamental notion was based on a simple idea, and that is that morality is really about helping other people. It's not, I don't want to say identical with, but very close to the idea of altruistic behavior. Morality concerns other people, and the idea is to benefit or help them. At the end of episode 1, I left us with a question, which is, what is it that benefits others? I mean, how do we know what benefits someone else? How do we know what helps them? Another way of saying that is, how do we know what is in someone else's interest? And Bentham has another simple insight, or at least an insight that he thought was simple and simply true. And that is that what is the mark or the sign of someone benefiting or having their interest satisfied is the feeling of pleasure. And so what that means is that when we help other people, we give them pleasure. We do something that results in pleasure for them. Bentham also used or believed that pleasure was the same thing as happiness. And that's a very controversial notion, and we'll talk about that more at some point. But the basic idea is for Bentham that um, what how we know someone else's uh, benefit or interest is what causes them pleasure. And Bentham, at the beginning of the article that I've given you, what is morality is utility, Bentham tells us in no ambiguous terms, I mean, just very clearly, how highly he thinks of pleasure and how important he thinks pleasure is for the functioning of human beings. And so I'm going to read the first half of the first paragraph of morality's utility. It would be helpful if you had this in front of you, as you know, you should have the readings in front of you when I talk about them. And so, morality's utility, Bentham uh, says, nature has placed mankind under the governance of two sovereign masters, pain and pleasure. It is for them alone to point out what we ought to do, as well as to determine what we shall do. On the one hand, the standard of right and wrong; on the other, the chain of causes and effects are fastened to their throne. They govern us in all we do, in all we say, in all we think. Every effort we can make to throw off our subjection will serve but to demonstrate and confirm it. And so what Bentham is saying here, I think it's fairly straightforward, is that pleasure is the fundamental motivation for human beings. If we're doing something, if I'm doing something, and you ask me why I'm doing that, I will eventually say, or I could be interpreted as saying, I'm doing that because it causes me pleasure. You know, even things as I want to say abstract in a sense as reading a book. Why do I read? Eventually I'll say, maybe fairly close to the top of the explanation, I'll say it causes me pleasure. It's pleasurable. Why do you play basketball? It causes me pleasure. Why do you wear the particular kinds of clothes that you wear? It causes me pleasure. I like the way I look. I like the way it makes me feel. How does it make me feel? It makes me feel pleasurable. It makes me feel pleasure. Um, so so and I just want to underscore this. There is no other motivation for our behavior, according to Bentham, than that it causes us pleasure. It's a tremendously important idea. Bentham thought it was simple and simply true. Look at all of human behavior. That's what you find. You even find it with animal behavior. So when we get to the question, how do we know what benefits us? The idea is, Bentham's moral idea is that what is good, what is right, what is obligatory, what is beneficial is what is moral, and that is what causes us pleasure. Um, so it's a key idea. And now one of the challenges here is, can we think of anything that motivates us besides a desire for pleasure? And I'm not going to answer that here. I'm going to probably include that, in some set of questions that I ask you. But it's an important question. Can we think of anything that motivates us that is something other than pleasure? I should also make clear here, before I forget, it's very important. By pleasure, Bentham also means the avoidance of pain. So when Bentham says pleasure, he also means the avoidance of pain. So if something that we're doing doesn't immediately cause us pleasure, doesn't seem to cause us pleasure, it allows us to avoid pain. Those two motivations are equivalent for Bentham. And so what Bentham is saying is that nothing motivates us except the desire for pleasure or the desire to avoid pain. Same thing. So essentially, one of the things that the Bentham is saying is that we are motivated by a feeling, a sensation. And one of the questions that I'm asking, the question I'm asking, or that we can ask about Bentham, is, do we have any other motivation in our behavior besides the sensation of pleasure? Now, one of the important things that Bentham is going to do is that he is going to claim that pleasure is equivalent to many, many other things. And so Bentham says, on the right-hand page of the reading that I've assigned, Morality is Utility, he says that, and this is right above the paragraph about the community interest. Bentham says, he's talking about utility, and it's a technical term. It doesn't mean usefulness necessarily. It's just what the name of the theory came to be called, and the name of the goal or end is utility, therefore utilitarian. And so Bentham says, by utility is meant that property in any object whereby it tends to produce benefit, advantage, pleasure, good, or happiness. All this in the present case comes to the same thing, or what comes again to the same thing, to prevent the happening of mischief, pain, evil, or unhappiness to the party whose interest is considered. If that party be the community in general, then the happiness of the community. If a particular individual, then the happiness of the individual. But let me read that key sentence, since there was a plane flying above, but I want to read it anyway. By utility is meant that property in any object whereby it tends to produce benefit, advantage, pleasure, good, or happiness, in parentheses, and this is an important parenthesis, all this in the present case comes to be the same thing, or what comes again to be the same thing, to prevent the happening of mischief, pain, evil, or unhappiness to the party whose interest is in question. So what Bentham wants to do is to include all these experiences under one category. So one of the things that I think that Bentham did not maybe consider is that, and Bentham wants to see our motivation, and this is important. One of the things that Bentham wants to see is that human motivation is simple. It's just pleasure, period. And there's a reason why that is important to Bentham's theory that I hope I'll explain a little bit more. But it's a simple motivation. It's pleasure, the avoidance of pain. Surely Bentham thought everybody knows what causes them pleasure. Everybody knows what causes them pain. You get pleasure from, well, from eating, from ice skating, from reading. It's just right there. It's right there. If you don't know that you're having pleasure, if you dispute that you're having pleasure, let me give you your favorite food, and that will be pleasure. The same as with pain. Pain is a simple experience. We know when we're feeling pain, and we know when we're not feeling pain. If you dispute that, let me punch you, and there's some pain right in front of you. Um, so it's very important that we understand that the very first lecture I had coming into utilitarianism about Bentham's idea that he wanted a moral theory that was simple, precise, and complete. This idea of simplicity is key to him. If you can show that pleasure, for instance, is not simple, and or that pain is not simple, that's actually a fairly important critique, a fairly important criticism of Bentham. Is pleasure simple? Is pain simple? But then what Bentham does is he complicates that, and the sense here is that Bentham doesn't quite see this or ignores it. He does say pleasure or benefit or advantage or good, all these in the present case come to be the same thing. All of those are equivalent. So Bentham, looking for something simple, but then he he complicates it with all these equivalences. If Bentham is right, then and all those things are the same are the same. Pleasure, benefit, advantage, good, then we should be able to replace the word pleasure with the word benefit or the word advantage or the word good, because those mean the same thing. That's what Bentham says. So one of the tests that we can make of whether Bentham is correct in this equivalence and really this complicating of what he believes is simple. One of the tests that we can make is, can we replace the word pleasure with these other words in the same sentence? So could we, for instance, replace the word pleasure? Why do I eat hamburgers? Um, I would explain at one level in Bentham's theory. I would explain because they give me pleasure. And this is, I'm giving you an autobiographical fact here. I really enjoy hamburgers with Dijon mustard. I'm sort of an elite snob when it comes to mustards. I really get pleasure from eating hamburgers. I had one, in fact, for dinner tonight. So Bentham would say, simple. What is in Neil's interest? It's something that causes him pleasure. What causes Neil pleasure? Eating hamburgers. But on the other hand, if we use Bentham's equivalences, pleasure means the same thing as benefit, then we run into problems, don't we? So I'm saying that I eat hamburgers because they bring me pleasure. They cause me pleasure. But can I really say that eating hamburgers brings me benefit or benefits me? I'm pretty sure they don't benefit me. Unfortunately, and if we look at Bentham, we look at these paradoxical statements. A lot of things that cause me pleasure are not beneficial. A lot of things that are beneficial for me don't cause me pleasure, but may even cause me pain more than occasionally. I don't really enjoy, this is also an autobiographical admission, I don't really enjoy exercising. Every so often I'll, get into it and do it. But if you ask me why am I, walking a track or, walking quickly on a track, a bunch of times in a given half hour or hour, I will not tell you that I'm walking the track because it causes me pleasure. I will tell you that I walk a track and I exercise because it benefits me. Um, and so at first blush, when we look at Bentham's theory, it seems to me pretty certain that that pleasure is not equivalent to benefit, advantage, uh, um, good, and all the other equivalences that Bentham makes. So one of the criticisms that one of the critiques of Bentham's theory is that it complicates his theory of a standard of behavior. What is in my interest? Well, that's what's good. That's what's beneficial. According to Bentham, it's an easy move then. It's an easy thing to know what's beneficial because that's what's pleasurable. And pleasure is pretty simple and certain. You know if you're in pleasure, if you're having pleasure, you know if you're experiencing pain. The problem is it's not true. And I think what Bentham did here was to uh, sort of be so excited about the idea. Oh, here's pleasure. It's simple, and pleasure is what helps other people, is what is in their interest. If you ask what anybody wants, it's something that brings them pleasure. Um, and so Bentham had what he thought was a great standard or great motivation for our behavior, but it's not true. So what I want to do, I'm going to end this episode number 2, and we're gonna take up this because this idea of pleasure and benefit and what's going on here is very important, and so we will revisit this probably in episode 3. So I'm going to end this now. I will talk to you later.